Is this muted? We're like, we're not going to hear. Okay. It's muted. See, because we can hear it. Yeah, we can hear it. So maybe we can do it. Okay, that should be fine. Yeah. All right, so I don't need to see that. Oh, we do, because she's going to need to share screen though. Where'd it go? Okay, there it is. All right.
Get started. My name is Jessica Yarger, and I coordinate this branch with the Library of Los Angeles. And this is our first in-person how many of you are members? I see some faces I recognize. Great. And how many of you attended any of our because we're trying to simultaneously do in-person and a remote. So we're live streaming this to our YouTube channel. So Chuck. Okay. There. Hi, everybody on YouTube. See? Mistake number one. Okay. So after we kind of transition back to this in-person thing, our processes, we're starting to kind of figure out what our process is going to be for checking seeds out, etc. So right now we have it that if you are a member and you want to check out seeds, you need to do all that online. Right. Seed envelopes are being prepped in another location, and then we're coming here and pick them up here, or we can mail them to you. If you're not a member yet, we have membership forms in the back. We also have a QR code if you want to sign up on your phone on a Google Doc or a Google form. And hopefully, from this point, we're here once a month. Hopefully doing it both remote and in person. So it's always the first Saturday. Next month in June, I'll be doing a workshop on these. Sign up, and then we send out communications about twice a month regarding seed checkout presentation, and you can check out up to 4 varieties a month. And then ideas that we learn together, because we're all still learning, be included, about saving seeds so that we can bring seeds back to the library and strengthen our catalog. And really over time, helping maintain a catalog that slowly adapts to our foothills and River Valley and River Valley. A long process, but we really encourage people to kind of take the lead and try saving seeds. And maybe you just start with one type, but we'll talk a lot about that. We also have YouTube videos of recordings of prior seed saving workshops. That was one of the silver linings, right? So we recorded, when we went remote, we recorded all of our presentations, and you can see them on our YouTube channel. So if you have we are all volunteer run. If there's actually more of us, but many couldn't attend today, but so we have a whole crew of us working behind the scenes to make sure that happen. So if you're interested in getting involved, we always need more help. All right, so now I'm going to introduce her. Yeah.
You are live on YouTube.
Oh,
Joy is
good.
watching you.
Oh, good. Hi, Joy. I am going to introduce our speaker, Anastasia Cole, the Master Gardener from the class of 2020. And I find it very fitting that she's here today in person because I've known Anastasia since almost the beginning of the pandemic because we've done a lot of online teaching together. And I'm meeting her in person for the first time today. She's a great presenter, super fun. So now what do we do on this overview? And if you need any technical, we gotta, you wanna, I'll just stay by and for sharing screens.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and put the PowerPoint up so that can be in the background. Is that
Okay, yeah.
Play from the beginning, and then I'll have this.
Share.
Yes.
Then get this one.
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
All right, so let me know if you guys can see that clearly. So my name is Anastasia. Like Jessica said, I am a 2020 Master Gardener. And pretty much what that means is that we like to learn and we also like to teach. And so that's one of my favorite things to do is speaking out loud, doing public speaking. And it doesn't matter if it's just talking about squirrels or talking about anything. I really like to share my knowledge. And one of the things I like to do when I am teaching is I like to learn from the audience because it's not just a one-way situation. It's an opportunity for me to gather information from you all and you guys all get to learn from each other. And so today we're going to be talking about container gardening. So when I am not doing container gardening, I am experimenting with different types of juices. I like to buy wholesale juice and experiment with different combinations and things of that nature. And I also like to skateboard. This is me. I've been a speech skate park, doing an early grab. And so again, when I'm not doing gardening and learn about that, I also like to skate. I also got a new cat, in which I've been learning how to, control and play with. And of course, my girlfriend is here to support me. Thank you so much, Liz, for coming. So right here is my garden right here. It's actually located in Long Beach at the El Dorado Community. It was very dry, very dusty, and hope you guys can still see me. I'll try. On the right-hand side, this is what it looked like of this past season, where we were able to amend the soil, get some good bugs thrown in there, and so yeah, it looks really beautiful. So this is just really what the results of just learning. How long did that take? What was it? Made couple. Okay, yeah, 3 months probably because you have to work in the manure into the soil and everything like that. And of course, you have to fill everything. Okay. So today's topic. So today we're going to be talking about just a variety of things, but basically the fundamentals of container gardening. Can I get a kind of raise of hands of anyone who's done container gardening? Who wants to get more recognized? Okay, so just really quick before we dive into this, can someone just give me an overview experience of their experience doing container gardening? Do you mind that?
Yeah, in my case, I really love to see containers since they started. And then they grow like a beautiful butterfly, you know. I love them, and yeah, I try to buy I try to make my own compost with my kitchen. And also, I use organic soil.
Okay, okay. And do you do indoor or do you do outdoor gardening?
Outdoor.
Outdoor. Does anyone do indoor here? Mine, you guys are outdoor? Okay, good to know. So the topics that we're going to go over is just types of gardening, planting, types of containers, potting mix, fertilizer, bugs, and of course, what can be planted. And if you guys have anything that you guys want to chime in, please do just raise your hand and add to it because I will go over basic and there's so many things to talk about. Okay, so the types of gardening. So there's three main soil, and of course you so directly into the soil, whether it's with seeds or with trans, and I'll talk about that in a second. Another type of gardening is raised beds, and this essentially is a closed container, and you put soil on top of the bed of your in-ground gardening. And so one of the benefits of doing a raised bed gardening is for someone who may not have the best soil underneath, or it's probably very hard and dry, or for someone who may want to monitor the health of their soil, they like to opt out for the container gardening. And there's many other reasons, please do chime in. And then there's also container gardening. This right here is, of course, what we're going to be talking about today. One of the many benefits of container gardening is the opportunities to be very creative, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But it provides an opportunity for you to get creative of whether or not you want to do vertical tower gardening, if you want to use oil pots, if you want to decorate it, if you want to make it glazed and make it, beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Another great benefit is that it's easily mobile. So at my community garden, we have each a 20 by 30 plot of land, which is actually a pretty big space. But we have some designated plots that's just cement, and they're have container gardening. And one of the benefits of that is for people who are in wheelchairs, or if they're not able to bend down very low. That's one of the really big benefits, is that you can kind of easily access it. It's easily accessible. One of the great reasons also is that plants have the tendency to take up space. For instance, like spearmint. If you guys ever seen spearmint grow, it kind of spreads very wide, and it can just grow all over the place. But if you grow spearmint inside of a container, then it's contained in that one section area. Another reason that it's really beneficial is that there's less soil-borne diseases as well. So which I'll also talk about a little bit later on, but when you are doing container gardening, you're not attracting the typical diseases that you may find inside of the garden soil. She's putting together some packets of seeds, and you have the option to either in your container garden directly sow a seed right into your soil, or you can buy like one of these 6 packs right here from your local nursery. The difference between the two, it all comes down to whether or not you guys have time to grow straight from seed. If you're just a beginner and you want to just quickly get started, then you can kind of grow straight from a transplant straight from the nursery. And there's other different benefits, which I'll also talk about a bit later on, but these are the 2 different types of gardening that you can kind of start with. Either you're going directly from seed, or you're going from transplant. Okay, so this, I think, is a topic that gets often overlooked in the planning phase. And I shall admit that I am, I definitely need to work on the planning phase, just thinking about what I want to do before I even just jump into it. Some things to think about. Namely, whether or not, again, like this young woman was mentioning, she does outdoor gardening. Whether you want to do indoor gardening, it all really makes a difference of water retention, how much sunlight you're going to get. These are some of the things that you're going to want to think about. And then also what to plant. Try doing some Googling, do some research on the things that you want to plant, and then what are those requirements as well. And then you'll find whether or not you can actually plant that plant. If you're doing it indoor and you're trying to grow cucumbers and there's not enough sunlight, then you may need to backtrack and look for another plant to grow. The other topics, of course, sun exposure, budget, time, and space. When talking about sun exposure, I'm talking about whether or not that plant needs full sun, does it need partial shade, or does it need full shade. So if you're growing vegetables, if you're growing succulents, if you're growing flowers, it's all going to make a difference on how much sun you're going to need. So when I say about full sun, I'm thinking 8 to 10 hours of full sunlight on that plant as a requirement per day. When I say partial shade, it could be sorry about that, it could be 4 to 6 hours. So you start thinking about how much sun do I actually get in that actual space that, where I want to plant. One thing that you can use, a tool that you can use is your iPhone or even your Android phone. If you're unsure of, where the sun is going to be going out, across the sky during the day from that southeast all the way to the west, then you can just use your iPhone, look at your compass, and it can tell you, okay, the direction of the sun right here, it's facing this direction, so it should go across the sky over to, the west, instead of the west. So I think that's a very important thing to think about. Let me grab some water. Oh, there's a baby. That's my co-host. She'll be in a minute. The next topic is you want to think about is budget. Budget is something that that was a lesson I definitely had to learn when thinking about even just container gardening. Container gardening is relatively inexpensive compared to in-ground gardening because you're not doing a lot of amending and all these things that you have to do to the soil. And there's I think a small initial upfront cost when it comes to container gardening. So once you buy the container, once you buy the pruners or the trellis, then you really don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't really have to worry about purchasing those things over and over again. And there's many options of buying it either used or you can buy it new. How many of you guys heard of Craigslist, OfferUp, Lego? Have you guys heard of those places? Yeah, so you can utilize those places. Have you used it, Judy, before to getting gardening stuff?
Buy nothing.
Buy Nothing. So Buy Nothing, Judy says, is another website that you can use. So instead of running straight to your local nursery where it may be a cost out of your range, then you can try to look it on a reuse site to get some of your materials. Just ensure that they are clean and that if you buy like a part or something that you can go ahead and bleach it or clean it very well because you want to reduce, of course, those soil-borne diseases. Yes, and then there's also do-it-yourself on YouTube. You can do YouTube and see how you can create different things yourself. I know I'm going to call you out, Judy, for a number of times, but Judy is so creative, and she kind of stitches her own aprons and stuff, goes to the reuse store, and she kind of just gets really creative with her gardening tools. And so I get a lot of ideas from Judy. So that's another way, just knowing your budget. Another thing is hours away from your plants. That's one thing that I really had to learn. So I'll say pre-pandemic, I had no time to garden. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I had time to do any gardening. It was dark already. I didn't know how my plants were reacting in the day. So you do have to be mindful of whatever it is that you're going to plant. Do I have time to have time to locate cater to your plant? Then it's possible that you can look through like alternate. That's just another method you can look into, or even other methods like in-ground irrigation. As you can see right there, it's a terracotta pot. This right here is my girlfriend's. Have you guys? Like where you grow for the plant, but you keep the opening at the top. Overhead, I usually put some tape there over the top of it. Thank you. So just to add on to this, thank you so much, Jessica and Eloise. Like they were saying, you submerge this under the soil in your pot. And this part right here is sticking out at the top. And the good thing about the terracotta pot is it's very porous. And so the water slowly leaches out of the pot. And so if you, again, don't have time to water your pot, then this is an alternative method right here. Another method is, of course, tower gardens, which I'll show you a video in a second. Yeah.
was reading an article yesterday from Yvonne Savio, who's master gardener person extraordinaire. And she takes 5-gallon pots, just the black ones from the nursery that already have the holes in the bottom. She just uses those and digs them down, leaves a lip a little bit high above, the lizards don't fall in and drown. And then she says she also can just put manure directly into the water and then the tea will escape. This is a really good article that she sent out yesterday. And I have lots of those pots. I've never thought to dig them down. Just the regular black plastic nursery pots. She's used the 1 gallon, but she said you had to fill them too often. So now she uses the 5 gallon. They have little holes at the bottom.
And I think she does that because it's pretty water deeper,
Yeah.
so you're not getting the evaporation and the roots of the plant.
Yeah. The article was about how you water your veggies in this drought.
Thank you. That's really good. And if anyone's interested in that article, I can grab it from Judy and maybe can get it out to everybody. So thank you for that. So there's, this time is something that you definitely want to think about, be realistic with. When pandemic happened, I had a lot of time. And we went through that. The next thing you want to think about is space. Spacing is very important. So for someone who's living in an apartment building and they only have a patio area, and then they get really excited and they want to grow tomatoes, they want to grow squash, they want to grow all these sorts of things, but they forget possibly when upon maturity, how big that plant is probably going to grow, how much space it's going to take up. So just like this young woman kind of yawning, like it's cute when it's small, and then it kind of grows up and it takes up so much space, and then you think, oh my goodness, where am I going to plant? So it's something for you to think about in that, of course, like space of how big your plants are going to get upon maturity. Another thing to think about is where are you going to store all of these pots and trellises and things of that nature when those plants are no longer in season. At my plot, because I have a lot of space, I'm able to store these wiring fences in the corner of my garden. But for someone who's living in an apartment, that's something that you probably want to think about. For someone who's living in your house, possibly in your garage, or maybe a designated storage. So think about, where am I going to store all these supplies to and stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the different types of containers and what you guys can kind of experiment with. I think containers that you can use, whether it's terracotta or whether or not it's the plastic black flower today, and you can use a glass right here. So there's many different containers that you can use to get really, really creative. One bag that I thought was just really interesting, and that this felt like material bag right here, as you can see in the corner. It's a I can't remember the actual name of it, but one great thing about this is that it's very, very light, very, very thin, and then it allows for a lot of soil to be held in it without taking up, so much outer space, I should say. Does anybody have any other benefits that they've experienced with something like that like this? Have you used this before? Do you want to chime in on this? Okay. So okay. Very nice, very nice. And the great thing about it is when you're no longer using the bag, just fold it up and you can put it away. And that's another great thing when you're thinking about space as well. So there's many different types of plants that you can and containers that you can use. Also, I think one thing that's really interesting to think about when you're thinking about indoor and outdoor and which types of pots, I'll give an example. I had a terracotta pot and I had a rubber tree plant was growing inside of it. And I knew how much water was leaching out. I knew how often to water this rubber tree plant. But when I transferred it over into a black bin, the watering was a little bit different. And I noticed that the rubber tree plant started to wilt a little bit. Why? Because the level at which the water evaporated out of the terracotta pot was different from the way material, it evaporated out of this pot. And so I have to get used to this type of pot and the water needs of this type of container. So thinking about, again, not just only indoor and outdoor of water retention, but again, the type of container and just getting to know your plant and how often your plant needs water in relation to what type of container you're using. Another thing to also keep in mind is that when you're outdoors and you're having a metal bin like this, Judy, this is your metal bin, right? A metal bin like this, think about the sunlight that is blazing down on that pot, this metal bin. Do you think that it's probably going to get a bit more hotter than a bin that's probably indoors? Most likely, right? And so when you're thinking about again, the water retention, how much sun is possibly going to heat up this bin versus when it's inside as well. Another thing to also think about when it comes to just container type is that color also plays a role in how much sunlight is going to be blazing down in that pot. So of course, black absorbs more heat. And so this pot may be more likely to absorb more heat than, we'll say, like a lighter color pot. So if you're thinking about kind of heat retention and how much you want your plant to stay cool, possibly having a cooler color pot can also be something that you want to think about. So these are the beautiful ways in which one can get really, really creative. Right, or this pot right here, you don't necessarily have to have your standard use anything that is a closed container that has some holes at the bottom. Very important part right there is that it has some sort of drainage at the bottom. I noticed that when I've gone to like the dollar store, I've picked up some terracotta pots and I noticed that they didn't have holes at the bottom. There's no problem. You can just get a drill and then you can kind of just create holes. And there you go. You have some good drainage right there. So these are the many ways in which you can really just get very, very creative. I snagged these from YouTube and my patio look just beautiful and really aesthetically pleasing. Go ahead and get creative and you can paint your pots. You can put, it looks like this person put their plant in a Converse shoe. So there's many things that you can do to really, spice up your container gardening. This right here I thought was really cool for people who do live in apartment spaces and they don't have an area for them to garden, or if they have just an outdoor balcony, you can do vertical gardening. You can have your pots on top of each other. Just get really creative to really maintain a certain amount of space if you don't really have a lot of space. I also thought this was really, really interesting as well. For those who are interested in sustainability and they're interested in recycling and they're interested in repurposing things, you don't necessarily have to just throw things away. Start thinking about how can I reuse this to be a space in which plants can also grow as well. So I thought this was really cool. This right here is just some YouTube links for anyone who would like some more ideas on the different types of containers that can be used as well. As you can see, some people are using tires, some people are using this vertical tower, all sorts of things. So this right here is an example of the vertical tower. For again, just thinking about space or thinking about watering. This right here is located at North Long Beach Community Garden. Let's see if I can push play on it.
So I can show you guys kind of what it looks like. I think this is just really, really cool.
So as you can see, in this small, tiny space, people are able to grow beets and grow strawberries in this small, another way of, I would say, container gardening, because it gives you an opportunity to put it in a closed container. I'll skip through the slide, but if you guys can look at it later. But this right here is a different types of container gardens and what can be grown in them and what's beneficial to be grown in certain containers. Okay, so we're going to go and talk about soil Can anybody give me a reason why you would think that garden soil you may not want to use garden soil in your container pots? Gina, yeah. Okay.
Not as much aeration
Mhm. Thank you so much for that. And those are great answers. And yes, she's absolutely correct. Garden soil has worms and it has different microbes that are moving throughout the soil, and they're creating these air pockets throughout the soil so that air and water can permeate throughout the soil, so that those roots can kind of trickle on down. But in a container garden, you don't have that going on. You don't have worms and different microbes that are kind of moving throughout your soil, so that if you were to take garden soil and put it directly into your container, that soil would eventually get compressed down, and then your roots won't be able to go down into the soil. Another reason why you may not want to use garden soil is because, again, going back to those soil-borne diseases, you don't want to take the diseases things that could possibly or potentially be a disease and carry it over into your container garden. You want to keep it as sterile as possible, clean as possible, and pest-free. And if anybody else has any other reasons as well. And then also, so just thinking about the soil preparation and what kind of soil mix actually goes inside of a container gardening, you'll often see on any potting soil mix, you'll see a number of different things like peat moss. It is a great way for you to absorb and hold moisture. You'll hear about vermiculite or perlite, and those are these volcanic mined rock in which is heated up to about 1,500 to 2,000 degrees, and it's expanded. And have you guys seen pumice before? The pumice in which you kind of scrub your feet with and stuff like that. And if you ever seen those, they have these little pockets, these hole pockets. And so essentially that's what is also being included inside of potting mix or some potting mix. Why? Because it has these air pockets, and those air pockets are also able to hold moisture. So you're kind of creating almost like a pseudo garden, or kind of imitating what would be in a regular garden, and placing it into your container garden. So you're creating, space for water to circulate and air as well. And then some, you'll see different things like bark, and you'll see sawdust, some compost for nutrients. So these are the things that you'll probably typically see inside your potting soil. Another great thing is that if you were to buy it commercially, usually it's sterilized, usually they clean it, so you don't have to worry about a lot of the diseases and things like that. Usually it's clean. And if you decide to make your own mix, which probably some of us may do, then you can, use these components, but you'll know what's going inside of your potting soil. And did you mention that you tried making your own potting soil? Compost. Your own compost. Okay. But yeah, the many benefits, again, is just it makes it easier to work with and helps them just kind of go down. Okay, so after you're done and you're mixing all those components, mixed throughout the soil. And if you decide to just go to the garden store to pick up some soil, if you're just getting started, you'll see some of these different brands at the store. And if you get a little bit confused as to what it is that you're supposed to be purchasing, you don't have to really think too hard about it, because the picture kind of shows you this container directly on the picture. And that kind of will help you guide you. Another great thing is that if you look at the ingredients, you can just check the ingredients. You can see that it has coconut coir, perlite, and some of those great nutrients that are really beneficial for your container gardening. Another thing that I did want to point out is the Organic Materials Review Institute. That's the name of it. This right here is an organization, just like when you guys go to the store and you see like a certified organic symbol. Some people like to ensure that the soil that they're getting is upholds to like a certain standard. And so this right here is an organization that a company wanted to kind of go through that organization, get certified, then they can get this listed on their bag, and you can know that they are probably meeting certain standards to ensure that it's good quality soil.
Is there anything I missed about that?
Yes.
What was the name of the organization again?
It's an organic materials review institute.
Also, if you're amending the soil, what's like the recipe for it? You talked about perlite, you talked about coconut coir, I mean.
Like
how-
ratio wise,
Well, just how would you prepare it? What would be like the best soil? If you're amending it yourself.
Does anybody have a possible response to that?
I personally never made my own soil. Doing ground gardening, does anyone have any experience with that?
Partners are really like, have a ratio that she likes to put out. And she was really set up farmer. So I use her ratio. Off the top of my head, I don't know, we have like 6 or 7 different ingredients, and then she mixes it in a wheelbarrow or a giant bucket. And you use whatever you want to do.
Hopefully, does that answer your question? I'm sorry, no.
No, but that's.
Okay, we have someone right
Basically,
here.
depends on what kind of soil you have to start with.
Okay.
So you have to amend with sand or.
And so your question is around just kind of like the process of actually creating the soil?
Well, like if you have, like, let's say you get soil like the Armstrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you add perlite, if you add coconut, if you add hummus.
If you feel like whatever it is that you're planting needs more of it, if you feel like you want more perlite, more, say for instance, for succulents, the amount of perlite or air circulation for succulents is not the same for if you're growing cucumbers. And so if you have a bag of soil and you notice that it probably is very compact when you put water on it, then by all means add coconut coir or add perlite or vermiculite to it to actually amend the soil.
What I come down to finally, if I'm just doing pots, and I use a lot of pots, I use the top one on the left. It's the Kellogg's Omri. It's for raised beds and for potting vegetables. You don't have to do to it. Because if you read it, it'll say it's already got perlite in it. It's already got this in it. It's already got that in it. So if you're just starting out, that's a really good idea. Now at the community garden, we do it differently because we have so many pots that we actually mix stuff up. So we do the wheelbarrow thing and we put in, I don't know the recipe, but I'm trying to make the recipe, but that, don't get, you know, it's not that hard if you can just buy a really good one. And now it's, the 2 cubic feet is like $8.97 at.
Thank you. And it's, yes.
I just want to make a suggestion. I always add worm casting
Okay.
to my soil because it acts as a pesticide and a fertilizer. And it's natural.
I love that. And what's your name?
Teresa.
Thank you so much. So Teresa mentioned that she likes to add worm castings as a nutrient base of fertilizer that she likes to add to her soil. And I'm glad that you're talking about fertilizer because we are actually going to segue into fertilizer. And so Teresa, I'd love for you to chime in for whatever experience that you have to bring. So when we're talking about fertilizer, we're talking about the actual nutrient part. When I was talking about the soil, I was thinking more so of the actual physical properties of your container gardening. But just like we'll say like a baby, like when a baby is born, like it has, you know, water, air, and, you know, it has a safe environment, but it also needs nutrients like either milk from the mother or milk from like some sort of like supplement. And so that's the same thing with your container gardening. Typically if in ground, when you have worms that are trickling throughout the soil, different microbes or different beneficial bugs, and they're dying and decaying, those nutrients get placed into the soil and the plants are able to get the nutrients from the soil. But it's a little bit different when you have a container gardening. Those things aren't available. So you have to create a pseudo environment for these types of for your type of your container. And so that's exactly what fertilizer does. It adds nutrients to your soil. So there's many ways in which we can. Some people like to do composting. For beginner, then you can buy fertilizer directly from Home Depot or Lowe's. Store, you'll oftentimes see these three numbers listed somewhere on. Okay, what's her name? The order listed is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the three macronutrients that are very much needed inside of, in order for all plants to thrive. And so if you're wondering, well, this one says 4, this one says 10, 13, 12, how do I know which one to kind of get? First, you want to look at the bag, and you can easily see the picture from there. It can give you an indication. And then also, it depends on what you're growing. So a 444 container is essentially saying that whatever volume size this container is, there's going to be 4% of nitrogen, 4% of phosphorus, and 4% of potassium inside of that container. And if you want to know, like, well, how do I get the measurements for that? It should be on the back of the bag, but you can just take the volume of the bag and you can multiply by the percentage of the item. Be able to divide it up of how much is, how much is what and how much volume in the bag.
Why do I care about that?
Why do you care about nitrogen?
Knowing what percentage of bag is not.
Oh, well, not what percentage of bag is nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. How much is that? But in the volume of the bag, if you want to know how much within each section of the bag, how much nitrogen, phosphorus is in a particular volume.
Why do I care about that?
Some people just like to know. Some people like to know information, that for some people. Some people like to know.
Maybe if you're not using the whole bag and you're rolling it out and putting only a certain quantity into a pot, then you're having a sense of how much of those nutrients you're putting in that.
Well, I would think it would be
Thank you.
uniform throughout the entire bag. You know, if you take a cup out of the bottom, or you take a cup out of the top of the
Yeah.
bag, it's gonna be 444.
Definitely, it's going to be 444. However, if you're, say, for instance, planting, hi, baby. Say, for instance, if you're planting a particular flower, if you're planting a particular plant, how much you're scooping, that volume size of how much you're scooping for that particular plant, you may want to read the directions of how much of this nutrients of this bag is needed for that.
Well, then it seems like what you want to do is choose the right bag with the right set of numbers, not how much is in the particular section of the bag.
Yeah, that's true. That's also true. Yeah.
I think it's totally true. It's also true.
To each his own for everyone. And that's a beautiful thing about container gardening. It's experimental. What works for, and then what works for you. Yeah.
I think there might be substitution in terms of the concentration, right? So these are different mixes that could be applicable to different kinds of plants. Some people might see. That's one way. Now you can take this 444 and put it into a 5-gallon container with a plant in it. If you dump the entire bag in, you would have a super high density of those three things. You actually want to know how much density and what concentration level of small the pot. So if you have a 5-gallon pot, you use half a cup. If you have a 2-gallon pot, you use half a cup. So that's, you can look that up and find out what kind of concentration of fertilizer per plant, the size of the container.
Okay, but wouldn't you also, I think you said, some plants are gonna need a different ratio.
Yes.
You can look up roses when you one thing, you can only another, right? You can look that up online.
Yep. Thank you so much for sharing that, when it comes to concentration. And you're right, for different, depending on what you're growing, there are gonna be different numbers depending on what you're growing. These are just some examples. If you go to Home Depot, you'll be littered with a lot of different combinations, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And just to even further detailed into that, exactly what nitrogen and phosphorus is really pertains to. So nitrogen, NPK, that ratio comes from the periodic table, and those are where the elements can be found. Nitrogen is mainly responsible for just the greening of the leaves, ensuring that they're very beautiful and vibrant looking. Phosphorus is for encouraging certain literature. Yeah. And then phosphorus is for the fruiting. So if you have, like, say for instance, a pepper or a tomato, or even just flowers, then you may want to have a higher level of nitrogen in your fertilizer. And then you have potassium, which is for overall just green healthiness of your soil. So for fighting off like diseases or different pests, that's where you want to have just an overall good amount of potassium. So this right here is a good example. And so just looking at this pepper tree on the right, on the left, let me just move this out the way. Kind of just do like that. Okay, so overall, this pepper tree is going to need some amount of nitrogen, some amount of phosphorus, and some amount of potassium. But as you can see, that the 6 is higher than the other numbers. Why? Because you're growing a flowering plant, you're growing peppers. And so for someone who wants to ensure that they have just overall hardiness of their peppers, and encouraging that there is fruiting, and then they want to have a good amount of phosphorus in their soil. And of course, potassium is lower than the other ones because you're encouraging just overall just healthiness of the soil. However, if you have a lawn and you just have grass growing and you're not really concerned about fruiting, grass doesn't fruit, then you're probably going to want to have a higher amount of nitrogen and that fertilizer for just nitrogen, because you're looking for that greeniness, you're looking for that aesthetically pleasing fertilizer that's going to make it look really nice. Does that make sense?
No, I'm just trying to read it.
But yeah, so nitrogen is responsible for growth of leaves and greenness of a plant. Phosphorus encourages strong roots, fruiting, and flower development. And then you have potassium, which helps the general health and hardiness of the plant. And it typically promotes growth and so this right here is just another representation visually, if you want to see how those macronutrients play a role. However, and then this right here is taken from the Master Gardener book. If you want to learn more about the functions and the absorption and movement throughout the soil, the symptoms of when you do too much nitrogen, what that can look like. We're not getting into the sciences in this presentation, but I put this here and you can definitely specifically for you, if you'd like to kind of dive deeper into like the science behind, how that impacts the soil. But there's
Where can you get the information on?
you can go to the UCANR website. Just type in, if you type in you should be able to find information about this. Because this is taken directly from the Master Garden template. And then also there are some micronutrients as well that exist in the soil. It's not just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. There's other beneficial nutrients that really help the soil thrive. There's sulfur, magnesium, calcium, zinc, iron. So there's other different nutrients that are definitely needed for the soil to thrive, depending on what you're growing. But the main ones that we mainly kind of discuss is the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay, so some common container garden bugs. Bugs are bound to have. They're part of our, they're part of our life cycle. But we also want to avoid them as much as possible. We want to either do, indoor or outdoor container gardening. Has anyone faced any garden bugs, and do they have any experiences on how they combat them? Yes? They ate them. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with battling them?
Every time I do my vegetables, I have this problem. I don't know what to do. I do water people. I drown them in water.
You drown them in water, which is
Tedious.
Yeah, I get the white fuzzy aphids that are kind of cute, but they're not cute when they're completely like overwhelming your plant. I just kind of I wipe them off with a while.
okay, and do you?
We run into most of these, but the most devastating by far is spider mites.
Okay,
And they can be difficult to figure out what they're, this casting, spider cat. So that's, you think, oh, the spiders are out. No, it's not always spiders, sometimes it's spider mites. And once they're using Wednesday, might be dead in 5 days. What we usually do to treat it because oil and cinnamon soap, every time we use water, so they out. But there's ones that are.
What do you see?
So like first you'll see the webbing and you'll see these tiny little dots moving around in the webbing of the mites. And then what you see on the leaves, is the leaves start getting spotted, they move to green and they'll very quickly move around. They're very sucking.
thank you for that. And I actually bought some neem oil if you want to take a look at it. Yeah, neem oil if you want. Yeah, okay. If you want to take a look at it, you can definitely look at just the back of it. And also I actually didn't mention earlier that I have like some background on it. If you wanted to take a look more at the fertilizer packaging and that NPK and just look around and you can see the different benefits and yeah.
On my roses, I think they're I get spray bottle with mild detergent.
Okay.
You spray the heck out of them. They actually
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely heard that. I've used can do dilute like Dr. Bronner or something like that. I've used that in the past. Yeah, thank you for that, sharing that. So does anyone else have any suggestions or anything? Yes?
This is the first year I had a horrible problem with pill bugs. Just eating off. You too. Oh, I know. And you do run the soil and they go, they turn into little pills. So I couldn't, they were just chopping off my plants, every single one, just chopping them. It would be perfect and the next day it's there and it's off. So I actually use food grade diatomaceous earth. And I couldn't find it at any store, including Armstrong, so I ended up getting it online. You really do want to get the food grade so that it's not hurting anybody, including dogs, so I just sprinkle that on our pillow, and I kill them because I don't like them. And they're supposed to be, I talked to another master gardener, he said, well, because pill bugs and sow bugs, you call them anything you want, are just, they eat decomposed things, and they're good, they're decomposers. So they're not supposed to be too bad. But he said, but what if you were a pill bug and you saw a beautiful green stem versus all this stuff you've been eating before? Wouldn't you just chop off that? What is that? It is actually fossils, ground up fossils. And it kills the bugs. It's white. It's a white powder. So you want to be careful. You don't want to inhale it. It actually is sharp, thank you. That's my word. It's sharp, and actually, when the pill bugs step on it, it will go into their body. The other thing is it does something else internal with digestion. You just sprinkle it. It's on the directions. You sprinkle it, and it takes a little bit of time, like 24 hours, and they don't get it wet. I hope so. When they've eaten off 24 peppers that I planted, I'm a real fan of not using anything at all. But I tell you, this year, this year, I've had it.
And then we use neem oil, and I don't think it's like, if you know exactly what neem oil targets.
I don't.
I have another solution I use for pill bugs. It's a mechanical solution. So
So I cut out the bottom of a 4-inch pot. But I actually put a physical barrier so and they don't like climb up over. I keep it around the base, but I kind of like get it into the soil, maybe half an inch. And then, leave on it till it's not big enough that the soil is not. And I also pincher bugs also will do the same thing. And so that can keep those out. Sort of like outside out of mind, for them, and they're not falling up and over. So if you don't want to worry about size, you can start up with other ways.
Thank you. And then Teresa, have I met you before? Possibly. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say about the DE tour. We have now. Inside of the indoor plant, we're putting this, get ready for it. Yeah, going back to the worms, probably, I could learn nothing about it. And it's such a great exercise. Now, it's systemic, so it takes a little longer, but it gets good. Okay.
Thank you. And lastly, Elise, did you want to know? I think I learned this from Judy. I haven't tried yet, but I really want to. It's just for aphids having a bait plant, like a plant that they like. So it's a description. You have milkweed or something that like it normally that which is normal to have another plant that you don't care as much about, and also wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. And if you ever YouTube Diatomaceous Earth and they have a video where they put like a roach or something like that. It's a sad video, but it's very interesting to watch because you'll see it absorb and then the dye just kind of surrounds it and then that sharp Diatomaceous Earth gets inside and eventually kills it. But did you want to say one more thing?
Just one more thing about aphids.
Yes.
Watch for ants. They promote aphids. If you see ants, it's likely to be aphid around. Yeah. Cultivating the summer.
Question about, what kind of bug, who's on the second one? So it works on things like aphids, it works on white flies, it works on spider mites, and you have it broken down by sucking and chewing. Like a grasshopper for chewing, bugs, so that you don't need neem oil for those, it's just sucking bugs.
Thank you so much for that. Great insight. So if you guys on this side didn't hear what Judy said, Judy mentioned that neem oil in the lemon pack, she asked, what bugs can neem oil be used for? Judy mentioned that sucking bugs typically were a good target for driving those types of pests away.
Another thing that you can use also is ladybug.
Yeah.
So careful to me.
You buy like a big box of like and then
What
it depends.
What I learned is, when you put this ladybug, it has to be almost in the dark time, not in the daytime, because in the daytime they will fly away. But if you put it there at that time, they want to leave the eggs and everything. You can see the eggs.
Very interesting. Thank you. Did you have experience?
They all flew away.
Okay, so they all flew away for her, and then for her, they actually worked. And so that was a really great insight, is that at nighttime, she experimented and she used ladybugs at night. So this right here is, if you're kind of wondering what's kind of eating your plant, this right here is just a visual representation of the different things that might be causing your plant to be either dying away, or if you see like some little lines, I've seen these lines throughout my plant, then it's most likely a beetle or a fly that's probably there. So first you want to use some sort of repellent. And then a last resort that's probably not much talked about is that some people do use, insecticides or some sort of herbicide or whatever the case may be. Not encouraging that. I also want to give full information that people do use different things for what their purposes are. And then there's also some household items. So if people are looking for just different household items or different remedies, like I've heard people using eggshells at the base of their plants to deter some certain slugs to be able to crawl on top of, to get even, anywhere near the base of your plant. So if anybody wants to take some pictures there. Yeah, so there's a lot of different options that you can kind of just experiment with. And then Eloise earlier, she mentioned nasturtiums. Remember talking about those repellents. So if you don't want to resort to using some sort of spray or some sort of concoction, then you can go ahead and just use a plant that can just adhere the buds to another location. So that's also another option that you can use. So if you guys, probably it's a little bit far away from you, but you see lavender is an option to deter moths and fleas away. You have the marigolds for mosquitoes and aphids, nasturtiums for white flies, cabbage, lupus, aphids. So there's a lot of different things that, again, you can Google it, but there's a lot of different options and ways that you can experiment with to naturally repel pests away from your container garden. Yes? Does someone have a question?
If you're using a companion plant like that, how close or far from the
We've been, planting tomatoes in the container, and we're actually planting garlic with it. And that has helped so much. We also have moved grass. And, you know, every year we're always doing that, like our garden is so grass. And, but everything. And so we noticed planting garlic in the container, like, all of a sudden, we have all these things that we don't have. One of the things is what we have this person do, and then more, and then we're seeing red hot lavender, but the garlic, and garlic is present in everything. So that can be the real big.
Plant them directly into the container or into the container.
Flavor of our flower trees.
I love that. You guys get really creative. I love that. And this is with containers, which is really awesome. So again, you see how they mentioned that you don't necessarily have to plant a companion plant inside of the same pot. You can just put them in micropots and you can move them around as needed. Great question. Thank you for that, for sharing. And then, so this right here was also taken from the UCNR. So if you find yourself having some common issues, like you see that it's yellowing or it's wilting, or if it's looking a little bit leggy, then you have causes and then also what to do about it. So if you are growing some seedlings and you notice that in your windowsill, they're kind of look like they're kind of really tall and they're reaching for the light and they're kind of droopy, then you're like, well, what's going on? What's happening? Most likely it's not getting enough light and they're trying to reach for the sun. And so you probably want to put it in another location in order for it to really thrive as much as possible. And then, so this is some other options, is some other things to think about. If you see leaves with small holes that are distorted in shape, what most likely is it? Could possibly be a pest, right? And so you go back to the other slide and you look, okay, what exactly are these holes coming from? You know, where these holes are coming from. Okay, so when you're actually ready to plant, these next couple slides are just some suggestions. So if you're kind of wondering, what can I plant inside what size container? Just get started. But for small size containers, whether or not it's like the little 1-inch ones that you can buy from the nursery, you can put succulents inside of those. For bigger size ones, you can do microgreens, different types of herbs. You can also do strawberries, as you can see in this picture right here. This person is using, looks like some plastic containers, probably from Walmart, and they're using like this vertical style kind of gardening where they're doing like different microgreens. But as you get, you know, to a bigger medium size, then you may want to think about, okay, what can I grow? Can I grow carrots in this size? Also, for this type of like a 10-gallon size, you can do pole beans. You can start doing trellising. So there's a lot of different things you can do depending on the size of the container. One last thing you do want to think about is thinking about the depth of the container as well. So if you're growing carrots inside of, you know, a pot that does not have enough space for it to root all the way down, or a squash or cold beans, and you just want to keep in mind of how much depth that container has as well.
And how do you find out how much depth something is? You can Google it.
And you can look it online. Typically people just look it up online. Yeah. And it can tell you whether or not it's typically around 12 inches, 12 to 10 inches, whether it's going into the soil. Or if you're growing radishes, it may go down that much. If you're growing a carrot, it may go down this baby carrot. That's great. So it really just depends on what you're growing. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Well, and what about tomatoes? I know a carrot, it's gonna go down that, but tomatoes, I don't know how much. I think you say it's 5 gallons.
You're talking about bin size, you're talking about the depth.
How much do you have to need for tomato plant?
You just mentioned it, yeah, 5 gallons.
How many? 15 inches. Yeah. Tomatoes
You see
can
about
get
that-
3 feet
about that
long.
size?
If they have that much room, so, but how much do they need?
And isn't there a handout back there that has, I don't think you have it, but that, the Shrine Down container is pretty, like for most of your like larger garden vegetables, like.
Or a 15 gallon grow bag.
Yeah.
I have 4 tomatoes in the all.
You mentioned the 15-gallon grow bag, that's perfect because like on this 15-gallon bag, it's typically around 18 inches of depth. So that gives you an insight. So again, it really does come down to doing some research, and that goes back to that initial slide when I talked about planning of how much depth, and that will determine which type of container you're. And does anyone have any final questions? That kind of wraps up our presentation. Yes.
It takes us about 2 weeks to do composter and order it. It starts to pick up, it can fall, like, from.
Hi,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I have these people recommend putting, a water filter, but what if you are, I do not want, for you, salt or hot water. And, I have an issue, I have a lot of money on feed with plants, so much water. So those is actually is not, it's costing more because every.
I see, and so you're having a high, this sounds like, where are you getting your water from? Can I ask, is it straight from the tap water?
Yeah.
Okay, so there possibly, if anyone who's on, there could possibly be some amount of, salt content that possibly is in your water. Have you tried using like distilled water or, purchased water to see if it makes a difference?
Oh, I have big, and 60 of them.
Oh.
So.
Wow.
We're not really practical. And
Has anyone experienced with that with high salt?
I don't, I have something in the water too, and I don't have. The salt will kind of build up in the soil and the water, and so they recommend that once a year, you do a really deep watering, and flush it out. So wash it, it'll wash out, rather than that, hot, it can leach off the bottom. But that's like only, I use throw and pot. Maybe just getting a good flushing or replacing the soil when you are, if they're plants that are annual, you're taking it out. Soil.
We have saucers under them all. All of them, because, I don't have, ground. And,
So it's absorbing that water up and your water and again, it would
No,
go
I
right up.
water from the top.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. So I'm just showing you this. Like trying to clean up the floor, it's costing a lot because I use like a hot one, that's almost $30 a month.
Oh, yeah.
So those, each time I renew all the floor, it costs me at least $1,000. Wow. So
Have you done a soil test?
those soil is the new one that got is from my friend helping me, so they money because the pandemic I lost it all. So I use the CB compost. Every compost is not good either. Yeah, so when I'm trying to go extreme because I eat from my family. So the problem down to is the more.
Are you watering so thoroughly that it comes out and it runs out of the saucer or onto the ground?
I cannot do
For a
that.
minute
It's
or
not
two?
allowed, I'm telling you.
So you're watering just so it fills up the saucer each time and then stops.
Yeah.
So that could be your issue. You're putting salt in and it's never running out.
Oh.
And so it's building up at the lower level of the saucer and think about, the way to cut the water out. So every time it's evaporating out, all those white solids will flush it out. Outcomes of both sides. The carbon comes to rinse out the salt, but ultimately you have to be able to rinse it. Or they might need to take their pot someplace, for that.
Yeah.
We
my
put
father-
filters on the hose. I don't know, are you using a hose? You're using a hose on your, we put filters
Yeah,
on the
that's why,
hoses. Have you tried that?
I'm
the filter?
looking for filters, but some of them is just only take out the chlorine, not everything. So, a few of my friends, they, recommend Beaver. This is what the name.
The osmosis.
Yeah,
filter.
that is-
Yeah, we have them in our house, so we haven't put them on the garden.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all, actually. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any other questions before I conclude? What I'd like to do at the end, if you guys would like to, we do have some soil down over here. We have some pots right here, some biodegradable containers. We have some plastic ones that are somewhere around. And then I have a couple of plants that I went ahead and purchased for the nursery, the cucumber. You have the space in the here, the trellis, and then we have some cilantro right there as well. You like to come and you like to create a kind of build your own container, then you're more than welcome to come up. Yeah, so thank you.
Does anyone have preferred Butterflies love our thing, and we're watching them around, we're like, oh, no, we have some.
Spray without my water.
You just spray.
Yeah, because I have a poly I can't just go there, even stay there. If we did that, they fall off, and then some of them is like a stick, some of them, like in soil. Away from other plants.
And I just want to say a quick close to the room, really quick. My name is Mallory Workman. Library, wanted for you guys all coming out to feedback.
Yeah, I was hoping there was some non-manual.
And just let you know that for the next month's seed library, will be the first Saturday of every month, like Day 18, that will be taught by Jessica. Our volunteers grant also should be learning program. Less presentation format, so have it right in here and do with the hand. Our next lab in June will be building these libraries. We have a process will be how you build and research. So feel free to sign up for that in June. And then July here is full of great July weekend. And Bob Lucas will be up at the community garden also.